The Joe Rogan Experience.
Well, that's the crazy thing when people like kind of like they have so much like hatred towards someone else for having a different view than them or being in a different situation. And you're like, dude, just understand, you were like two little circumstances away from being that guy. I see that a lot with people, and I'm on the side of like gun rights. Like I'm not for gun control, but the people who are like really shitty to these teenage kids who are like becoming famous, and you're like, dude, if you were a fucking teenager and you could have just been on the fucking news and everyone's praising you because you take this position, so we'd all fucking do that shit.
I said the exact same thing yesterday. I was talking about one of these NRA guys that was mocking these kids. I'm like, you're out of your fucking mind. If anybody should be talking about we got to do something, it's kids that got shot at.
Sure.
I mean,
why
this
not?
is they have the floor.
No, I understand.
They're supposed to have the floor. I mean, they just got shot at. They lost their friends, and they are standing up. And maybe they're not informed about a lot of issues. Maybe they don't know what a semi-automatic or an AR-15 is. Maybe they don't know those details. But they know that no one's doing shit, and people keep getting shot.
Yes, and they're kind of badass because they survived like
they got lucky.
Neo in the Matrix.
Yeah, they're not bad. They just fucking were in the right place.
But here's the thing: no one's
understand.
talking about that Maryland one. I mean, like, you don't talk about the positive ones.
Yes, but you know, because again, because that conflicts.
Tell the story.
So more or less in Maryland, there was this school shooting, or a kid came into school with a gun, but they had an armed security guard. He took him out. Nobody died.
Military trained guy got rid of him quick. And that's what NRA advocates are saying. Like, hey, this is a good thing. We should have someone who's an armed and ready responder at the school to prevent this kind of shit from happening. And there's a lot of veterans that would take that job happily, and you would have your kids 100% safe. And people are like, no, that's not the solution. The solution is take the guns away.
And like I don't like the idea of armed security at school. I don't like the idea of metal detectors. I don't like the idea of arming teachers. But it's like to just dismiss that and be like, no, gun control is the only reasonable measure, I think is naive. But just to the point, like you were saying before, I have no problem with people being like, hey, CNN shouldn't just be putting these kids on without having someone to rebut it, or they shouldn't be putting this on and just but to actually go at the kid. And be like, oh, this kid's fucking, just milking this experience. Like, whatever. Any of us would do a thing like that when we were a teenager.
And look, I don't have a horse in the race. I don't really give a shit. I don't really shoot guns. And I know, dude, when I've shot guns, it's just been really fun. There's no part of me that, like, I think I would swallow it a little more if people that, like, were really... big gun advocates would just kind of admit that, like, dude, it's pretty awesome. We want to blow shit up. It's fucking great, But you get this other sort of thing where I just think that you should have people that are really trained, really responsible, and we should have specific measures in place in order. And I know we do have that, but maybe we should look at it and push that line back even a little bit more. Because, you're right. Even in the example of the dude, taking out that kid in that school, I don't necessarily have an issue with having an armed security guard at the school to protect children, but I kind of have an issue with somebody who, you don't know when his girlfriend broke up with him and when this dude went batshit, right? Mm-hmm. So even when you have to give people psychological exams, like, when do they go crazy? When's there a moment where somebody snaps and now they're fucking crazy, right?
Yeah, I'm completely against gun control of just about any kind.
I know you
are.
But
I actually think when people, a lot of times Republicans will go, it's not about gun control, it's about mental health. I think that's even more of a cop-out, because you're like, what the fuck are you even saying by that? Like, what do you, there's lots of, when you say mental health, it's like, there's lots of people who suffer from, like, anxiety, depression, like all these things. It doesn't mean they're a risk to others. Like, what are you actually going to say? Like, I'm for unfettered gun rights, but everyone has to have, like, a psychological exam, and it's as if there's some way that we can predict who's going to shoot up a fucking school. And the truth of the matter is, it's really fucking tough.
No, it definitely is. But what you're saying isn't entirely correct, because it is absolutely about mental health, and you have to be fucking crazy to be a school shooter, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and most of these people are on some sort of psychiatric medicine. There's a giant percentage of them. So it is, in fact, a mental health issue, because they're literally on, most of them, like the vast percentage of them are on mental health medication. Yeah. So the question is whether or not it's the mental health medication that's causing them to do this shit, or whether or not they were already crazy and that medication was just trying to treat this disease and they got a hold of guns, and that's the problem, is the guns.
Yeah, so maybe I didn't say that, like, precisely enough, because I agree with everything you just said. I'm just making the point that the idea that it's like, oh, all we know is that there's this category of people who have mental health issues and they shouldn't be allowed to get guns is way too broad. But no, I think again, like you mentioned earlier, it's like, dude, they'll say anyone who's real fucked up nowadays, like has a lot of mental health issues, a lot, and is in school, they're going to put them on drugs. They put anyone who's borderline on drugs. So the really fucked up kids are on like a cocktail of drugs, and they'll admit with a lot of these like antidepressants, antipsychotics, that they can cause suicidal tendencies. Some of them will even say they cause homicidal tendencies. So I think it's pretty reasonable that maybe in some very small percentage of them, they cause you to just fucking want to go, or they push you at least in the direction of wanting to go just shoot up a bunch of people.
Well, they seem to relieve you of the feeling of consequences. They disassociate you from whatever you're experiencing.
Yeah.
That's one of the most disconcerting things about the idea that if someone has homicidal thoughts, but they're keeping them at bay, and then they take some pill that's saying, "Hey, fuck it, let's do this."
You're not exercising the mental processes of not killing people on your own. You need this thing to do it, and then you don't have your medication one day. I heard you talk about this the other day. It was kind of interesting. I forget who was on. Maybe it was Metzger or somebody, but you were talking about people that
He was very calm, cool, and collected.
Metzger was so relaxed on that episode. It was weird.
The best advertisement for Caveman Nitro you could have possibly had. It will make you into a raving madman.
The Maryland school shooter was killed by his own bullet, not the school resource officer, police said.
Shot himself in the head.
Oh, he shot himself in the head when the guy was coming after him.
Yeah.
Okay, but still kind of a similar moral of the story
Maybe not.
Maybe the guy grabbed his hand and made him shoot himself in the head.
This is definitely not the same story. The story was that this armed guy took him out.
Yes, that's what I heard as well.
That's what I had heard. Like, I'd heard a deceptive version of it then, because I heard that this guy engaged in a firefight with this kid and killed him instantly.
Yeah, that's what I read, like 6 different articles that said that.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, so maybe that's incorrect.
God, there's too many things to pay attention to.
His shot hit the shooter's gun, which was in his hand.
His shot hit the shooter's gun before
then
or
how'd
after
he
the
kill himself?
shooter shot himself?
Yeah.
So he shot himself with the gun that got shot?
It says the
afterwards?
officer shot struck Rollins' gun, which was in the teen's hand, the sheriff's office said. Nevertheless, his quick action confronting Rollins just 3 minutes after the teen shot 2 students has been credited with bringing the incident to a quick end.
So the guy did shoot the kid.
Yeah, but they didn't.
But he hit his gun.
That's not what
survived.
killed him. Yeah.
Right. So he shot him, and then after the guy shot him, he just shot himself while he still
It
could.
says the praise came
Or
even
the guy
when it was
could have shot
unclear
him
what happened.
after he was
Say that
dead.
again?
It says the praise came even when it was unclear which shot killed the teen.
Well, he definitely seems like he shot him. I mean, he was in the fire. He really was in a firefight with this fucking guy.
Yeah. I don't know, dude. Look. I think there's not a single answer to any of this. I think it is, definitely a mental health issue. I think nobody's gonna come up with a law that's gonna figure all this shit out. I don't live. I joked about it before, but I kind of live my life in a sort of ignorance is bliss state with this type of shit. I mean, I don't know. I have to guess my kid's not going to be shot to death in a school one day. Knock on wood, right? I know, and it's a horrible, horrible thing. But the reality is, I don't know if these people that are so obsessed with everything and just they're making it their lives, I almost feel like they're kind of missing the point. If my kid isn't going to be out at a rally holding a sign, I'm not spending my days doing that with him. I'm spending my days creating memories with him and just trying to spend my life having a good life. And I'm not really politicizing anything with my 5-year-old.
Well,
There's people that feel like they want to do something. They want to change. They don't want this to happen again. And if you lost your kid, you'd probably feel that way too.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know what I mean, there's way too many of these things. There's way too many of them. So we got to figure out what it is. I think the real issue relies here's one giant part of the problem. Everybody's looking at the final piece of the puzzle. The final piece of the puzzle when it all comes together is the school shooting. What gets someone to that position? How do they get to that? You got to go to step 1, not to step 10. If step 10 is a school shooting, you got to figure out how do we get less people to go from step 1 to step 2. How do we keep more people happy as young people? How do we give more people support? How do we give more people therapy or exercise or recreation or friendship or community guidance or whatever the fuck we're doing where we alienate people to the point where they literally want to go and shoot everybody else? It's like the physical equivalent of like flipping flipping over a game when you're losing.
Yeah,
you know.
I think that's a great analogy. By the way, I think that's exactly what it is. It's like, oh, this world is so bad for me.
Yeah.
Well, fuck you. Then
fuck
I'm gonna
your
come
kids.
fucking make it this for everybody.
Fuck that nice teacher.
I've thought, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think maybe the silver lining in this, like the best thing that could come out of this, and it has nothing to do with a law, is just that kids in high school will fucking think twice before they're brutally ostracizing some other kid. Because you're like, hey, watch out, that kid might be the one who fucking wants to murder all you guys.
Though. That's not
maybe
the way
not.
kids think, dude. Kids think they're invincible. They're not thinking about that. I remember when Columbine was such a big news story when I was in high school, I believe at the time.
I was for sure.
Yeah, it's your birthday actually. Is
ruined my
Columbine.
birthday that year. It's a real fucked up thing.
And dude, it was such a big deal. I had never seen anything like that before. This is before 9/11. 9/11 was the next big thing, but it happens so often now that because of the internet, I almost feel like people are also desensitized to like how crazy it was, because Columbine. Dude, it was bizarre watching the images on the news of the people running out of that school. It was like haunting. And I remember watching it, and my mom made this point, and my mom was a fucking drug addict, lunatic, but she had these weird little moments in her life where she said some crazy shit. And she was like, you know what? Yeah, maybe they shouldn't have fucked with those kids. Just in a weird way. And I was like, oh, damn, Mom, really? You're like defending these, but she just it wasn't defending the act of people getting killed, but it was sort of looking at the root, which is what you're saying. And she, she just kind of made that point. It kind of always stuck with me.
Well, I think even more than which I get the point, but even more than other kids bullying them, the truth is, if you want to get at the root, you want to be like, hey, parents, fucking love your kids and give them a really good childhood. But it's like, how do you actually make that happen?
There's a
very difficult
natural inclination that animals have to pick on the weaker ones. It's a terrible natural inclination that human beings have to avoid. Because chickens do it. I have chickens. My chickens fuck with the smaller chickens, and the less aggressive chickens, they fuck them up. They have a pecking order. I've seen it with dogs. With one dog becomes the alpha of the pack, takes over, dominates the other dogs. It's a natural thing. It's natural. It's natural in every single animal community. And it's natural with people. But we're smart, and we understand the consequence of that. And you got to give those kids a reason to not do that. But there's also the problem with, if you're going to school with LeBron James, okay, standing next to this fucking giant super athlete, you're like, shit! Kind of bullshit genetic roll of the dice that I get. This motherfucker got all aces. He's got 5 aces. He's 7 feet tall. He weighs 300 pounds and he moves like a panther. Fuck!